People would always come up to me and say, so where's your first destination? And I would say Road River. And they'd be like, stop being a smartass. And I'm like, I'm actually not. I just want to get off. We just want to get off the dock because that's the hardest part about cruising, I think.
On the Wind is presented by Pelagic Autopilots, a group of dedicated sailors and engineers developing autopilot solutions for the blue water cruiser, solo sailor, and racer. Pelagic systems have been tested in races and voyages around the globe. In fact, both boats at 59 North use Pelagic Autopilots, and we worked with Pelagic to build a custom unit for Falcon last year to suit her 30-ton displacement. Falcon's Pelagic Autopilot served us well for over 16,000 miles during her first offshore season and was one of the first new systems on board that didn't require significant tweaking after our initial sea trial. Pelagic's testing grounds are the Pacific coastal races, and their philosophy is to provide simple, self-contained products requiring no connection to proprietary data networks, one of the biggest advantages to us and the robust, redundant systems that we like to have on board Eastbjorn and Falcon. The Pelagic Autopilot uses the latest sensor and computer technologies to hold a course through the most difficult conditions. Pelagic Autopilots, built by offshore sailors for offshore sailors. Check out pelagicautopilot.com to learn more and spec your own system. On the Wind is also presented by Dive Blue, who make portable tankless scuba dive systems. We have one on each of our boats, in fact. Enjoy diving on your own terms with a Blue tankless dive system. What is tankless diving exactly? We like to think of it as innovation. Blue's tankless diving system gives divers an opportunity to experience the beauty of the underwater world without the constant worry of having heavy scuba tanks on hand. They carry two types of tankless dive systems, the Nemo system for tankless diving up to 10 feet, and the Nomad system, which is what we have on Falcon and Eastbjorn, for depths up to 30 feet. For us, it's not just about having fun. It allows us to clean the bottom of the boats, fix a wrapped prop, or otherwise inspect the keel and things that you used to have to do either with heavy scuba equipment or by taking a bunch of free dive breaths. And this is basically now a critical tool on both of our boats in our maintenance toolkit. So anybody that's a sailor that's doing your own stuff out there, I highly recommend one of these systems. The amount of money we've spent on divers over the years to clean the hull before a big passage would easily pay for a tankless scuba dive system. So check out the Nemo and Nomad dive systems at diveblue.com. That's DIVE BLU and then the number 3.com. Thanks again to Dive Blue for sponsoring the podcast. Ahoy, shipmates. Welcome back to another episode of On the Wind. I'm your host, Andy Schell, recording from a very cold and very beautiful Sweden. It was minus 18 degrees Celsius outside this morning. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's cold. But it's one of those colds where we've had like fog. So you get this rime frost on the trees. It looks like Candyland. Like all the trees are just covered in like an inch thick layer of this white frost. And the sun's shining today. And it is just like the picture perfect winter day. The snow on the ground is so fluffy that it's weightless. I wish we had mountains around because it's like perfect skiing snow. So I'm in a good mood today. I'm also in a good mood because I'm headed down to the west coast of Sweden tomorrow to check in on Eastbjorn at the yard at Vindö. And August and Adam are going to meet me there. And believe it or not, it's the first time that the three of us have ever been in the same place at the same time. We talk almost every day on Slack and on Zoom and all the rest, coordinating the boat maintenance and everything. And August has met Adam, and obviously I've met Adam and I've met August, but not three of us together in the same place. So I am really excited for that. We're going to spend 3 days down there checking out Eastbjorn and doing some fun stuff. And you'll probably hear their voices on the podcast intro next week because I'm going to take my recording stuff with me. As for today's episode, this one with Wendy, actually Wendy and I go back sort of indirectly over 15 years. When I was living in Annapolis in 2006, Wendy was writing articles, I think for the back page of Cruising World. I might be mistaken, maybe one of the bigger magazines. And her and her husband, Johnny, were refitting this steel boat, which we talk about in the episode. And he was the manager of the Annapolis Harbor Boat Yard, which still exists and is right downtown on the harbor front in Eastport, but facing the harbor. And Mia and I, when we first bought Arcturus, actually looked at a boat that Wendy and her husband were selling. It was a Peterson 34, a really cool boat that very more similar to our boat Spica now, same 70s sort of racer cruiser. And pretty cool story. Wendy actually, they sold that boat to get the bigger steel cruising boat, which they cruised for a while and then sold. And now they bought back the Peterson 34. And Johnny is now the manager of a boatyard up in Baltimore. So they're still on the Chesapeake. It's kind of come full circle for them. And it was really fun to sit down and talk to Wendy about those early days in Annapolis before they were cruising and then the actual cruising that they did. So kind of a personal episode with this one. And it's really cool that I get to work for Wendy now as a writer myself. And she's my editor at Sail, which it's a pretty cool little circle of life thing going on here, which I really like. As for 59 North, Falcon is wrapped up for the winter. Adam's leaving there tomorrow to meet us at Eastbourne. So we're going to relaunch her in January. Mia, me, and Axel are actually going down to Portugal for the New Year's Eve holiday and going to launch the boat, and Mia's going to do the first trip. So that's pretty fun, something fun to look forward to in only a few short weeks. I guess exactly a month from now, the first trip of 2024 starts. Speaking of which, we still have openings early in 2024 if you want to sail with Mia on that first trip or the second trip from Las Palmas to Cape Verde. There are 1 or 2 openings on each of those trips, so please join us, and we'd see you. You'll get to see both of us and Axel in Portugal if you come down and join that first trip. A note you may have noticed as well for the podcast, we are no longer doing Patreon nor taking donations, and instead we're directing everyone to come join us on the quarterdeck. The quarterdeck has become the way that people that can't or don't, or in addition to sailing with us, can support us on the internet so we can continue making free content like this. But also, it's a great way to learn seamanship. We've got over 500 members on there now, and at least weekly, me, August, Mia, one of our sailing staff, is posting something fun on there, as well as all the membership posting fun stuff on there to learn about seamanship and have these neat educational discussions. So if you've been supporting the podcast in the past via Patreon or donating to us directly, I'd encourage you to join the quarterdeck instead, as that stuff's going away, just to keep it simpler and easier to manage. Thanks to everyone that has supported us over the years. It's been really awesome to see that, and I hope to see you over on the quarterdeck. You can go to quarterdeck.59-north.com to sign up, and you get a couple-week free trial when you start a new membership. Okay, on to today's show. Here we go. You're listening to On the Wind, my podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Andy Schell. Wendy Mitman Clarke is the editor-in-chief at Sail magazine and a longtime cruiser herself. I work with Wendy regularly as a columnist for Sail, but had never actually sat down to talk about her background. I caught up with her and did just that at the Annapolis Sailboat Show in October, and from the captain's cabin on board the Pride of Baltimore II tall ship, we discussed her history as a sailor, failure in the cruising lifestyle, what it's like running a magazine, the writing process itself, and lots more. Do a quick sound check, Wendy. Can you tell me your name and what you had for breakfast, please?
My name is Wendy Mitman Clarke, and I had a Sophie's crepes. I had the huevos with black beans, and it was awesome.
Nice. That's a nice place. I forgot about that place.
Oh, it's key. It's key during the show.
That's great.
It's well priced. It's right around the corner. And this morning, opposite them was a nice little piece of wall you could sit on in the sunshine and eat your breakfast out of the wind, which is great.
Perfect. So we're sitting. We're rolling. We're just gonna keep going here. We're sitting in the Pride of Baltimore. What would you call this cabin, Jeff? This is the aft cabin on Pride of Baltimore. Thanks for letting us on board here.
The big aft cabin.
Yeah. So you and I are both. It's day 4 boat show. We're both a little weary, woozy, loopy. So we'll see how this goes.
How it goes.
Let's just start in the present. What is it like for you back here in Annapolis? Because you and I both have a history here, but we don't live here anymore.
Right.
So what does it feel like coming back for you?
It's always interesting to come back to Annapolis. When I first moved to Annapolis, it was quite a sleepy, little town. So it's
which was when?
1989.
Okay.
So
I was 5.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks a lot for that.
Sorry, I'm the one that should be sorry.
Yeah, so it's changed a lot. It's grown a lot. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming, but it's still stunningly beautiful. It has these moments where I'll come around a corner up top on top of the hill and look down, and the harbor's out there, and it's just it's just still a beautiful, beautiful town. So Yeah, it's neat.
And you've bounced around. Have you always been a sailing journalist? What would you call yourself, actually? If I introduced you to someone, you'd be like, I'm Wendy. And yes, you're editor of Sail, but like beyond that.
That's pretty complicated, actually, because actually a journalist, yes. A sailing writer, yes. An editor, yes. A poet, yes. A novelist, yes. I worked in communications for a while, but, fundamentally, and a science writer.
Okay.
So I've worn a lot of hats. And
have you ever had a quote unquote real job? Do you consider your job now a real job?
Oh, yeah.
What aspect of it? Why did you say it that way?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe it's a lot of responsibility. Sail Magazine, I grew up with Sail Magazine, and it's been around for better than 50 years. And it's just a tremendous magazine in the industry. And I feel honored to be the editor of it, but I also feel a great responsibility in that role. So sometimes that's why I say, yeah, it feels like a real job.
Are you a sailor first or a writer first?
Writer. Hold on. That's a hard question.
Well, I get what I was going to ask is, do you write mostly about sailing, or if it was something else, would you write about whatever that?
No, I write about everything.
Yeah.
Right. So, as a science writer, I've written about whale earwax. I've written about how they track certain migratory birds with these incredibly tiny transmitters. And I've written about, don't get me, lots of really cool science writing, which I really enjoy.
Tell us more about whale earwax.
Whale earwax is really incredible. So I did this story for Smithsonian Magazine a way back. And so whale earwax is like I'm losing my words. See, this is the problem.
We're not going to edit this. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. It's like a window into climate past, because it accumulates in their ear. And then, so when they used to, backstory is Smithsonian actually has a huge stash of whale earwax. And they were just it used to be collected when whales were killed. And so they kept it. And then, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, these scientists started asking questions of the whale earwax, like, what can you tell us about what the climate was like in San Diego Bay in 1890 when this whale was taken? Because it was all documented. So they could get information out of this substance that could give them info about, like, water quality, and it gives them all this information about the climate and the environment that these whales were in at the time, and it was all sort of documented so that they can track it through time.
It's pretty wild. Like, talk about like curiosity. Where does your curiosity lead you? Like, I wonder what that could tell us about.
Yeah, well, as soon as my editor there said, I have 3 story ideas for you, blah 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 blah, and whale earwax, and I went, whale earwax, right?
Wow.
I mean, what the heck?
So, all right. So this is supposedly a sailing podcast. What I always ask, you've been a sailor. Have you been a sailor your whole life?
Yeah, pretty much.
And where was the initiation? Like, why?
So I grew up in southern Pennsylvania, and my dad really wanted a sailboat. I grew up, bopping around on little boats on lakes up there, but he wanted a real cruising sailboat, and so he started bringing us down to the northern Chesapeake and Sassafras River and chartering a variety of vessels. My mom always wanted like houseboats. Dad always wanted sailboats, and thankfully Dad won out. And so he eventually got a couple of sailboats up there in the Sassafras. And so I grew up, just being pretty much a kid with a dog and a dinghy is how I grew up, and just cruising up and down the river and stuff, very low key. And then kind of did a couple offshore things with my dad and my brothers. Then took a break from it in college, and then ended up coming back to it when I moved to Annapolis to work for Soundings.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Vermont.
For?
English and history.
Okay, cool. I have a minor in history by default, because I switched majors 6 times in college, and I was started as a professional golf management.
That's a major?
It is, yeah. So basically, the PGA of America partners with a couple universities, and you can get your like not tour card, but teaching like certification
Right.
and a college degree at the same time. That was going to be my career before.
Well, they
sailing.
should do that for sailing, right?
They should. And if I ever quit sailing or if our business goes under or whatever, I'm going to revert to being a golf pro. So I got that in my back
But you
pocket.
could get it. What if you could get a degree in professional sailing?
I mean, yeah, it would, but like there wouldn't be any jobs, first of all. So maybe that's not the best thing, but so what, so you came back after college and got a job for Soundings. Was that on purpose?
No, first I went to work for the Associated Press.
Okay.
And I worked for the AP for 3.5 years in northern New England, out of Maine for a while, and then out of the Concord, New Hampshire bureau. And that was my journalism school. That was J school for me.
And what was the biggest takeaway for you from there? Like, what did that teach you?
Accuracy, incredible attention to detail. Don't get it wrong, because to do a corrective in the AP is like one of the worst things you ever have to go through as a writer and as a journalist. And I was really young and I made a lot of mistakes. But I think what the AP taught me more than anything is the value of being accurate.
As in like fact checking accurate?
Yeah, as in being and and I was also in being sort of ground truthing everything. Don't make any assumptions about anything.
I knew you from Annapolis. I didn't actually know you, but I knew of you when I first moved here. Johnny had the boat. Your husband Johnny was managing the boatyard over here, and you guys had Osprey, right? The steel.
No, we had
cruising boat.
We had Luna first. Luna
Okay.
was our Peterson 34, and our kids. We got Luna when our daughter was born. Our son was 3, and I had kind of had it up to my eyeballs with being a suburban mom, and kind of said to Johnny, "Get me a boat, or I'm gonna, jump off a bridge."
And you had not owned a boat for a while as a young parents?
That was the first boat we ever owned.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was great. Yeah. She was a racing boat, had been rowed hard and put up pretty wet. And so when we first got her, she was like completely stripped and worked overtime to make her a really fun, fast cruising boat for the kids and us. And we went all over the bay in it, and the kids grew up on that
How
boat.
old were the kids at the time?
Well, Bird was newborn, right? And he was 3. So, progressed from there. I mean, the pilot berths were perfect because we could let the baby roll around in there and no trouble at all. And Ko being 3, he loved pilot berths. It was like his own little secret cave. And so, yeah, it was a great boat for that.
So that's the connection, because we actually looked at that Peterson 34
when we were selling her get when we had the big boat. Yeah.
And that's when Mia and I bought Arcturus, we bought Arcturus in 2008. So it must have been
same time.
Had to be the same time, because I remember looking at it. It was hauled out over here at Annapolis Harbor Boatyard.
Yeah, same time.
And so what was the motivation to get a bigger cruising boat?
Well, when Johnny and I first met, the first thing we basically said is, hey, you don't want to have kids, right? And we were like, yeah, no, we don't have any kids.
How old were you when you met?
I was 28, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And the second thing we said was, you want to go sailing, right? So obviously the first thing changed, but the second thing never changed. And we made a choice that we wanted to go sailing with the kids. We didn't want to wait till we were retired. We wanted to take them with us and have them be part of that experience. So we needed a bigger boat to do that. So we went looking and found the Adams 45.
Both of those boats are like really unique though. Like you guys, were you guys like boat nerds? Like they're not just like the standard production boats even then that you see. And like Osprey was like particularly striking. And like an Adams 45, I don't even know what that is, and I know boats really well. So like, were you guys boat nerds? How did you create your criteria to like get what you wanted?
Yes, we're boat nerds. I would look on. So the way our house was arranged, I would sit on the computer at night and look at Yacht World night after night after night, and he would be opposite, like in the room opposite, and I would be like, "What about this?" And he'd be like, "Piece of junk." "What about that?" "No way." "What about this?" And he has pretty high standards about boats. And actually, I think it's accurate to say for him, kind of the simpler, the better, because a clean slate is something that you can build from.
Yep.
What you want.
I often say that actually. A guy just the other day sent me a listing. He's like, "This is great because it's got like, it's fully outfitted with all this stuff." I was like, yeah, if all that stuff doesn't work, like you're better off just having nothing and getting exactly what you want from the beginning.
Right. So we didn't know what an Adams 45 was. I would say it's going to sound dumb, but for, one of the criteria is beauty.
Well, I mean, that's not dumb.
Well,
that's like, to me, that's the only, if you don't have that, nothing else matters.
Yeah. So I would look at a boat and instantly be like, no, not, just the look of it would be yes or no.
Yeah.
So this boat rolled across like on I don't know, night 5, whatever it was, screen 1000. And this boat rolls up and I just went, whoa, what is that? And so I yelled over, Adams 45. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Neither one of us knew what the boat was. It's not Australian design, Australian build, steel, which we had never dealt with. But because she was steel, and she'd already done a lot of cruising, the family that owned her at that time was Canadian. Because she was steel, she was less expensive than glass. Her interior was beautiful and laid out really perfectly for us. And so, those were key points for us. A friend of ours who had gone cruising ahead of us said, ask yourself if you have to be at anchor in the pouring rain for 4 days straight with your kids, if everybody on the boat has a space to go to be by themselves, and then you'll probably be okay with it. And
that's a pretty good question to ask.
Yeah, it was. It made us think about it, So when we looked at the layout, can everybody get a little bit of their own space on this boat? And we could. So.
And what was Johnny's background? Why was he so picky? Like was he also working in sailing?
Yeah, he grew up in Annapolis. He's been sailing and racing his whole life, and working on and/or building boats his whole life. So he comes at it from that perspective. How hard is it to work on? How hard is it to maintain? How hard is it to fix? And that's a pretty critical perspective when you're going cruising full time, because you have to be the one to handle the problems.
I think it's always interesting, like asking, like, you have a certain, you being the editor of Sail, have a certain like authority. So it's always interesting to hear how you've made your own boat choices and what you did with that. So I think this is really fascinating. You said you hadn't worked with steel before. I mean, like, to me, I don't ever want to own a steel boat.
I don't.
But that's out of just, I have no experience with it.
Yeah. Well, after, we won't either again.
Okay, here we are. Why?
It's just a hard material to stay ahead of. I think it was Bernard Mortissier who talked about, his steel boat. He called it, what did he call it? The devil. I think he called Russ the devil.
Yep.
And, it's just unlike like a fiberglass boat where if you get a little water in the bilge, it's no sweat. You live with it, you sponge it out, whatever. You get a little water in the bilge of a steel boat, you start to have nightmares. So it's just a different medium. It's a little harder to work with. That said, we're in Guatemala and we found an area that was not good and we had to have it replaced. And
like a section of the hull?
Like a chunk of the hull, and not a big chunk, a piece. But, we went to a yard in Guatemala and had it fixed within a day. I mean, because steel is easy. Steel is steel. Yeah. Metal's easy. And that's one of the arguments for having a steel boat, is because you can take it to fairly remote places and not worry about having to get the material you need, because it's usually right there.
Because it's like work boats. There's work boats everywhere. Mm-hmm. But so interesting. So this is actually where the story diverges, because I remember watching you guys fit out Osprey over here and seeing the boat, but I don't actually know what you did with it. So what was the plan, and where did you go with it, and did the kids go, and tell me a little bit of the story.
Well, the plan was to get off the dock. People would always come up to me and say, so what's where's your first destination? And I would say Road River. And they'd be like, stop being a smartass. And I'm like, I'm actually not. I just want to get off. We just want to get off the dock, because that's the hardest part about cruising, I think, for a lot of people, is they get caught in that trap of, it's got to be perfect. I've got to be ready. I've got to have the money. Everything has to be perfect. And then they never go, because nothing's ever going to be perfect.
That's right.
So, so I wasn't being facetious. I really meant it. We never said anything like we're going to circumnavigate, because we never had any idea if we ever could do it. We just wanted to put one foot in front of the other, which is pretty much what we did. So the other unexpected thing that happened 2 months before we left was my mother died unexpectedly. And I would think it's fair to say that the whole first year of cruising, certainly the months leading up to leaving, I didn't even have time to grieve that. And so once we finally got out sailing, it kind of slammed me. And so coupled with, the adjustment to the cruising life, my husband going from a very, very intense job and running, 25 guys or whatever, to being on a boat with his family full time and attempting to run me, which isn't good, not a good idea. The first year was pretty tough. And so we went to the Bahamas. I said, finally, we got down to the Gementos and literally we're watching like the lightning flashing over Cuba, which was pretty awesome. But I said, I want to go home. I don't want to continue right now. I want to go home and see my brothers and sisters. And he understood that and said, yeah, okay, let's go home. So we went back to the East Coast, went up to Maine that summer, and then ended up going back down to the Bahamas, then hooked up with some new cruising friends, went to the DR, Dominican Republic, and then we went due west to Guatemala to meet other cruising friends in the Rio. Spent some time in Guatemala and then Honduras, and then spent a winter down in Panama, which was extraordinary, down in the Cunhiala. Then bounced back up and went out to the Bahamas again, and then Bermuda, then back in, then Nova Scotia. So I started to call it, what did I call it? Springboard sailing or something, slingshot sailing. It seemed like we kind of went back and forth. But, we went to a lot of amazing places. No regrets about where we went. I mean,
when you first returned, when you said you wanted to go home, what did that feel like?
What, coming home?
The first time. Yeah, when you said, I'm ready to go home.
I was a little disappointed in myself, right? I mean, you have certain expectations about what you think you're capable of and what you think you want to do. And then you get out there and the reality is maybe not what you thought in terms of your own ability to do the thing. And I just wasn't quite ready, So I sort of needed that first winter plus, grieving the loss of my mom, to kind of adjust. So coming home, I was a little disappointed in myself. But it was the right thing to do because when we went back out, I was ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. And it sounds like you had a home to go back to.
Well, not really. I mean, we didn't have. My brothers and sisters were here.
Did you sell everything and move on to the boat? Or
yeah.
You really did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that must have felt even scarier than thinking like, oh.
It did. Yeah. And I think if we did it again, and I know if we did it again, we've already talked about it, we would have a home base. And I just sort of felt like I need that.
Well, go deeper on that. Because I agree with you.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean by home base, and why do you feel like you need that?
I don't know. I mean, this whole concept of what is home is something I've thought about an awful lot through that whole experience and afterwards. I wanted to believe that I could be like this vagabond sailor and go all over the world and never feel drawn back. But I do feel drawn back. I mean, I feel drawn back to Maine. I feel drawn back to Vermont. These are places that sort of lodge in your soul. And for me, at least, I have to go back there and sort of reground sometimes. So I think just having a home base where you can have some of the things that are important to you, where you can know you can come back to if you have to, be safe and decompress. I was just talking to a woman who came by our booth, actually. She and her husband have been cruising for, a couple of years now. And she was a writer too. And so we were talking about how surprised we were, how hard it was to write the first year we were out. And she talked about also that idea of, kind of needing to come back, needing a vacation from cruising, which is a funny concept. People think, why on earth would you need a vacation from cruising? Oh, you do. You really do.
Well, I mean, I asked this because
I
feel the same. We feel the same way. I mean, we have a lifestyle that requires us to travel for work, but also our work is out cruising, basically. So it's kind of flip-flop. But like it's been much easier to have a home base. So I relate to that. But I was wondering, like, you said you felt like you you felt disappointed because you felt like you wanted to be the person that could just be free. Where do you think, like, because I relate to that want as well. Do you think that's like innate, or are we like all this classic sailing books you read and stuff? Are we just kind of conditioned to think that? And then if that's the case, are the writers that write about all that stuff, at least in my case, that inspire that, are they just lying?
That's a really blunt way to put it. No, I don't know. Do you think Bernard Moitessier was lying? No way.
Yeah, but he's there is only one Bernard Moitessier.
Right,
so to think that we could like share that,
right.
Like that's also impossible. We had this, this came up recently internally with 59 North with us talking about, like this is a little bit unrelated, but how with women in sailing and how like these old books talking about how men did all this amazing things and they just took for granted that like their wives were home with the kids and stuff like that, and like how that was
unless
celebrated.
You were Beryl Smeaton, in which case you were there.
Yeah. So but anyway, this idea that what you read and what is like canonical in the sailing lore and all this stuff and everything that inspires us, and it's all, we're all reading the same stuff, how you might have to actually think about it a little bit critically to like read between the lines of what is actually happening. Because I think Moitessier is a bad example, because I actually do think he, believed all that. But I wonder how much of writing, and I think we probably both, well, I would make this mistake where you want to write something compelling and you're maybe not telling the entire story sometimes.
So I wrote a column at one point called Mythbusters. My oldest brother has this thing. He says the theory of the personal myth. And the personal myth is this story you tell yourself about this person that, you think you are or you can be. Mm-hmm. And then you go out there and you end up puking for 5 days and you realize that you're not, okay, so maybe I'm not the blue water sailor I thought I was, or I get scared, or I get whatever it is. And you come face to face with that personal myth, the reality of what it is. And then you kind of think about that. And it, does that diminish you somehow? I think when it comes to writing about sailing, I'll just speak from my own experience. I have tried to be pretty honest about running up against that kind of thing, because I think a lot of people do go, at least I'm not sure about now, but when I was cruising, full time, I felt like people did sort of read these things and they might go out there and then run into a reality that was very different because people didn't tell the whole story. And I found it to be difficult sometimes, I found myself to be desperately homesick sometimes and questioning my decisions about my kids and all these other things, I don't know, maybe I just worried more than other people. But I do feel like there's a lot more layers to it than necessarily comes out in the people who are out there telling you how great it is all the time.
Well, now you have this too. You have this. I also feel responsible a little bit for telling the whole story, but now also that in itself is like a marketing thing to be authentic. Mm-hmm. So like you're like, are you actually, or are you just saying you're telling the whole story? It's all very confusing. And how do you find the right information? But it's interesting. You said you sold everything, because I when you said you went home, I was like, oh good, at least I didn't sell everything, because I used to worry, like when people that did the rallies and stuff, it was like they'd never been offshore. They were doing this, sailing from here to Tortola. They sold everything, moved on this boat. It's like, you've never been in the ocean? Like, this is a pretty big step to take. And then, because the stakes are higher if you don't like it, then you're you get so far down the line that it's hard to go back.
So there's an argument for that, in that, what was the line about Magellan burning all his ships?
Yeah.
There's a certain commitment level to it, right? You don't have something necessarily to go straight back to. Yep. So maybe you're a little more committed. I don't know. For us, I think it was more a matter of logistics. We didn't want the burden of something back home. We didn't own our own home at the time, and so that we didn't have that thing to deal with. Yeah. Nor did we have it to rent out to earn money or something like that. So it's just how it worked out for us. But I don't know. I mean, home is... everybody defines it differently, and it changes over time, I find.
Yeah, I'm in this situation where you just said the burden. Like we live on a farm, and it's an old house with a couple of farm buildings, and everything's in various states of disrepair. And I'm only home 7 months a year, and like when I am home, I want to relax at home and not really work on that stuff. So it is a double-edged sword. Like I have a place to go back to, but then when I'm back there, it's work.
Yeah.
But I think to share that myth of yourself, like. Pretty much every single trip, and I tell this to all our crew, on the first night or two, I'll lay in my cabin. I'm not feeling 100%. I haven't slept great. I'm tired. And I'm just like, I chose this as my life. Like, this, my career. Like, this is what I'm doing. I have to do this now. I got all this. And then inevitably that goes away. Like, especially with ocean sailing. Like, you get into it 3-4 days later and you forget all that. A guy on the booth today, Matt, who sailed with me to Greenland earlier this summer, he signed up for another trip in the Pacific. And he's like, I bet you didn't think I was going to come back because of how seasick I got. And I was like, actually, Matt, like I didn't even remember you got seasick because everyone gets seasick and everyone gets over it and then everyone forgets. And you keep coming back. And that's, I think, the beauty of it too, is the highs and the lows that you experience, which is, more intense at sea.
See, you just made me feel better because getting seasick is part of my personal myth problem because I've always gotten seasick. And I always get over it too, but it's just so unpleasant. God, it's
the worst. I mean, I'm very, very lucky that I almost never get seasick, but I don't ever feel. It takes 3 days at sea to get acclimated. No matter how good you feel, you're not sleeping right. It's just it's tough.
Yeah.
Are we being invaded, Jeff?
No. Oh.
So we're sitting in the. We're sitting in the cabin and someone's trying to climb through the butterfly hatch.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing, and I think part of course, being seasick is also psychological, and you start to get fearful because you're not. I mean, I know plenty of people who just deal with it and don't go that direction with it, but other people don't. So it's kind of a complicated matter.
I think we've had 500 or 600 crew that have sailed with us over the years, and I can count on one hand the amount of people that like it actually changed their career, like not career, but changed their life directions. Like, oh, this is way worse than I thought.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure if I should do ocean sailing.
Yeah,
ocean sailing, but that's my point. Is it's a very small number.
Right.
Most people just live with it because it's worth it. Like at the other end, in some way.
Yeah. But I do sometimes ask the question, like, how come I have to be this way? Like why can't I be one of those people who never gets sick? If I love the ocean so much, it just seems like it shouldn't be the two things.
It feels unfair.
You should get a break.
Yeah. So on the writing side of things, how have there's a huge difference between being a writer and an editor. So how did you manage? Like, did you make that transition? Do you still feel like both? Like, how do you feel about both those responsibilities? What is the difference, I guess, first?
I think it's, well, for one thing, I never give up writing. And I think actually I think it's really important to be a writer, to be a good editor, because you understand how hard it is to do the writing. So, and you also understand how, people tried.
We're still being invaded.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to keep my
my
feeble train of thought in order. So editing is definitely a completely different animal. I do enjoy it, actually. It's not creative like writing, but it's a different kind of problem solving that I like. And I like taking a story or working with a writer who's never written a story before, and they're kind of maybe nervous about it. And I say, it's okay. We'll work together.
Yeah.
And you'll send me a draft, and it might, maybe we need to work on this structure, or maybe we need to do this, and sort of walking them through that process is pretty fun. So, I mean, I like the challenge of being an editor, but I think being a writer first helps me be a better editor.
What is your process as a writer?
What kind of writing?
If you're writing something to be published for a magazine, like do you make an outline? Do you just sit down, stream of consciousness, and then go back and edit? How do you create? How does it go from like an idea to a finished piece?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that you do, and I learned this at the AP.
For you, I mean.
Yeah. One of these things that I learned at the AP was, as I said earlier, assume nothing. So a lot of people will go in, have a story idea, and they'll go into that story idea with a set idea of the story. And then if they get into it and they realize that actually what the information they're getting or whatever isn't what they thought, they'll resist that. They'll be like, but no, this is the story I wanted.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little more flexible and allow sometimes the story to unfold the way it's supposed to for you. But generally when I sit down to write, so my process is get as much information as I can, accumulate all the info, get all the assets, think about it a lot as I'm gathering those assets, as I'm talking to people, doing the interviews or whatever. And then some people don't do it this way, but I always have to get my lead nailed down. I have to know what the lead is, how I'm going to go into it. And sometimes I'll sit down and it'll take me 6 hours to do that. And then it'll take me 2 hours to write the rest of the story. So it really is for me getting past that first hurdle. That is the hardest part for me. I don't know. Process. It's a little different for everything, but that's generally how I operate.
And when you guys were out cruising, you mentioned how it was hard to write the first year. Were you writing for yourself? Were you writing for magazines? Did you keep a blog? Did you keep a journal?
I kept a journal for myself. Every night almost, I'd sit down and offload into my laptop. Most of that never saw the light of day, and shouldn't. But, that is where I took down, like even now when we look back on it, like if somebody says, oh, do you remember doing X? And I'll be like, I'll go look it up, because I wrote down like every detail, like where we went, what we did. We were keeping obviously a ship's log and keeping a log of the miles we were traveling, but this was separate. So I would write down everything that, I was seeing and hearing and thinking and feeling in that journal. And I'm really glad I did that, because at the time I needed it, but also it's now when I go back to it, it's pretty cool because I can, no, actually I do remember it right. It was like this, or, oh, that was his name, because I wrote it down, but I can't remember it. So, and also writing the journal, keeping my own journal helped me process the ideas that would come out. Like for instance, the myth story, the personal myth. So I was writing, when I first, I was editor at Chesapeake Bay Magazine when we were getting ready to go. And when I knew we were going to go, at that time, Bernadette, Bernard had the back page of Cruising World, and I read her pretty religiously, the Log of Ithaca. And Beth Leonard is the other writer that I read religiously, who's also a friend of mine. And so as the time was approaching, I read that Ithaca was ending and they were coming back to land. And so I didn't know John Burnham, who was actually the editor of Cruising World at the time, but I called the number to get his email and he answered the phone. And so I cold called him, not meaning to. And he's like, what can I do? How can I help you? And I said, well, I think you need a columnist and I need a new column because I'm leaving the Chesapeake Bay. And so that's what ended up happening. So I was writing the back page of Cruising World for, I think, 5 years, might have been 6 total, just documenting that process. Because at that time, there weren't many kids in that magazine. And that's one of the things I pointed out to John, and he agreed with that, not many families. So I was trying to document that whole transition and what it was like cruising with a family. Full time. Yeah,
I remember those columns because my mom, we had cruised when I was a kid in the 90s, and my mom read your column religiously. She was a fan of yours. My mom also died young. She was 62, died of brain cancer. So it was after she'd done all that. So I think she read your column and was kind of nostalgic for the sailing that we had done as a family after that. So that was, I remember that well.
Yeah. So I was writing, on a professional level, I was doing that every month. And writing a couple of features now and then. But I would say, the majority of my writing was private. I didn't want to keep a blog. I didn't want the obligation.
Yeah.
I didn't know what we were going into. I wanted to see first. And I just didn't really want to commit to that much.
So you have a very cool story. When you guys returned, you sold the boat and you wound up full circle with Luna again.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah, we Luna came back into the family, and now it's pretty neat because it's just the two of us instead of 4 of us, and so she fits better. And just finding time to sail is the hardest part. we're busy.
Well,
It's
that's
busy.
what I was going to ask you. How do you manage, like, you've done the cruising thing, so you kind of, like, in one sense you did it, you have that, you're satisfied, but are you satisfied with that? Do you still have, like, the itch to, like, just go off and do that again?
Yes.
Or okay.
I mean, I wouldn't say I have the itch to sell everything and go off, open-ended again.
Yeah.
But I definitely have the itch to go, like, if you told me I could take off for 6 months this winter and, bop down to the Bahamas again, oh yeah. I really hope to go up to New England next summer and spend at least a couple of months just sailing. I can work remotely. So as long as, like a lot of people, as long as I have good internet, I can still do my work. And, but yeah, I don't think that itch ever goes. I mean, that's something that I think about a lot about sailing, and the whole sailing business and the industry and stuff. I don't, like, if you ask me to identify myself, I'm going to say mother, writer, wife, sailor. It's like, it's a part of your identity. It's like who you are. It's who you grew up as. It's something you can never live without. And so no matter what, I hope that I'm, 85 years old and sailing a Marshall catboat somewhere. I mean, always kind of want to be out there. Yeah.
Does your job at Sail allow you to scratch some of that itch? Like, does that satisfy, like, because you're around boats all the time, you're here at the boat show, or is that just, like, make it worse?
No, I think it's cool because what I like, I love talking to people about their sailing. And like that woman who just stopped by the booth just before I came over here, next thing you know, we're chatting for 20 minutes and we're like best pals. It's, people love to talk about the kind of sailing that they do. And some people do some incredibly cool sailing. And I love getting down into that and talking with people about their experiences and what they've done and what they want to do. So, I mean, my job, I kind of get to, vicariously enjoy that when I talk to people. Would I love to get more time to go sailing? Yeah, who wouldn't? I mean,
So,
I want to go with you.
You're invited.
I want to go north.
You're invited. We have, the other boat's based in Norway, so it's there. You're invited.
Yeah.
I have to put you on the spot. You and I have been working on this idea of writing sort of a top 10 blue water boats sort of thing and doing that. So give me your top 3.
Oh, don't do that to
I
me,
just
man.
did it. You have to.
You can't. You can't.
They don't have to be the top 3. Just give me 3.
Okay. Oh, man. I'm terrible at this because I love too many of them.
It's fine. Just give me 3. The first 3 that come to mind.
Bristol Channel Cutter.
Okay.
I have very dear friends of mine.
Perfect answer.
Yeah, Nika and Jeremy Waters on their boat Calypso. I've written about them. That is the biggest little boat I've ever seen. And it's, it's just a tremendously cool boat. I don't think I could do it, but I think it's a great boat. And I've obviously proven over and over again. I'm kind of in love with swans. Always have been.
Do you have a particular favorite?
No. I think anyone would do.
I got an email yesterday from one of our former crew. He's like, I heard there's like an organization that's got an SNS Swan 48, like Eastbjorns. They're trying to like give it a new home or whatever. He's like, this could be an opportunity for 59 North. I was like, slow down. I don't need any more opportunities.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm obviously with you on
I
that.
mean,
have you seen so there's friends of ours actually have a Swan 65 that's on the anchorage out here.
Nice.
Blue Magic. The Swedish guy took my
Wow.
celestial course a while ago. They sailed here from Sweden.
Yeah, and then you're gonna kill me for the third one.
Oh no.
The schooner Blue Nose.
Oh, what do you mean? Why would I kill you
Oh,
for
just
that?
because we're at the boat show, right? So I'm thinking
You're
like
offending.
production.
You're offending Jeff here. You're sitting on board the Pride of Baltimore, and you're saying the schooner Blue
I'm really
Nose.
sorry. No, and I mean the Pride of Baltimore. I was just writing about her the other day, describing, unmistakable. I mean, you see this ship going up the bay, and the rake of the masts on this thing instantly. It's like, oh, there goes Pride. I mean,
it's. Both of
so
these.
pretty, so beautiful.
Lunenburg's my favorite harbor in the world, and we were just up there earlier this summer, and Blue Nose was out, but while we were on anchor, they came in and they sailed through, and we actually exchanged cannon fire with Blue Nose when we departed Lunenburg Harbor, and she's one of my favorites. I put Pride first. I'm not just saying that because Jeff's sitting here. I wrote about Pride too for yachting. I write for Yachting World as well occasionally, and they do on their back page. They have like a cool boats little thing, and it's usually if they'll ask like different people, hey, what's your favorite boat, whatever, and why, and I used Pride for that example.
But I'm a really big fan of smaller boats. I mean, I love big boats. Don't get me wrong. But I love, like I said, a Marshall cat boat. I think they're gorgeous. I mean, I think like Illyrians are amazing. I love the idea of boats that you can just jump in and go and spend the day sailing.
Well, so we saw walking across the bridge. Gary Jobson has a little. It looks like a mini America's Cup. It's like what is it called? A Hood 32 or something. And he was out here sailing around, and the bridge was opening, and it looked like he sailed through the bridge. I'm pretty sure he switched on his electric motor, but it was pretty cool. When we had Falcon here in Annapolis, we were leaving, and he was sailing around, and somebody got a photo of like Gary Jobson. We were both under sail next to Falcon, and it looked like ridiculous. It looked tiny, but it was very cool. And that's the same sort of thing. He's out here every day, just self-tacking jib, sailing that thing around.
The other really active fleet here is the Herreshoff 12.5.
Yeah,
my
those are
my
cool.
Sister-in-law races in that, and they're ferociously fun. Yeah.
They dip the gaff to go under the bridge here, so they don't have to open the drawbridge, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a column about the boat show in this issue of Sail, and I meant what I said. I have a boat problem, and all my life I've just, I'd love that one. Yeah, that one would be great. I'd love to have one of those, I mean, and they kind of run the gamut. I mean, I was madly in love with Santa Cruz 52s for a long time. So just kind of, it's hard to pin me down on this one. I'm just saying.
Well, it's cool though. You came full circle back. You guys have Luna again, which you said was a Peterson 34, which is also very similar. If you look at the specs, very similar to our boat Spica in Sweden, which is an Orlean 34. And I'm the same way. I like a small, simple boat is like, of the three boats that we have, two with the business, my favorite's still my boat.
I mean, the first
easy.
time we took Luna out after I'd been on Osprey for 4.5 years, I felt like I had gone from, no offense to Osprey, from a Mack truck to a Ferrari. I mean, just for me being a fairly small person, she's just super nimble, easy to be on, easy to handle. All the sails are easy for me to handle. It's ergonomically a much easier boat for me to be on. But just in terms of, we come into a dock and I can just push her right off, and it's simple. It's not, not a big deal. It's nice.
And meanwhile, I was talking to Jan the other day here when I interviewed him, and he's talking about handling Pride under sail and all these things, and as if Pride is a small boat. And I was like, okay.
Perspective is everything.
Yeah, totally. Well, Wendy, I've really enjoyed working with you. I mean, we've worked together. You've been sail editor now for
a little over a
couple of years. Yeah,
no, a little over a year.
It feels longer than that, but it's been really fun working together with you. I enjoy it. It's nice to sit down and talk with you. How much of a mountain do you have now after boat show to sift through? Is this like?
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous, but I really miss my dog, and I'm looking forward to going home and spending long walks with her. And lots of work, but the boat show's been great. Just coming away from it with lots of story ideas, and it's really fun to get to see like you, because you're always off and gone, and that's one of the things that's so great about the boat show. It is sort of this place where everybody converges on at once, and so it's a great way to see everybody. And I also just want to return the compliment. I really love working with you. I love the fact that you're out there doing it and bringing it back into sail, and that's invaluable. Love it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Cool. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad I could put my words together.
Well, yeah. Now you can relax for a while.
Okay.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Pelagic Autopilots for sponsoring this episode of the show. To spec your own system and learn more about their independent, robust, and redundant autopilots, go to pelagicautopilots.com. Thanks again to Dive Blue for presenting this episode of the podcast. Go to diveblue.com, that's DIVEBLU and the number 3, to check out the Nemo and Nomad tankless dive systems, and never hold your breath to fix a wrapped prop again. On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 Degrees North and hosted by me, Andy Schell, and also by August Sandberg, Emma Garshagen, and occasionally Ben Doer. The show is mixed and produced in Frederick, Maryland by Lee Cumberland. Ads are read by us, the hosts, and occasionally by 59 North's bosun Adam Brown and podcast producer Lee Cumberland. Episode artwork and website show notes are done by Laura Parent in San Francisco. The intro theme music is composed and performed by former podcast guest and musician Cameron Dale, while the outro music you're hearing now is, of course, by our friends, the Stormweather Shanty Choir. We love hearing from our fans, so send your questions and comments to holdfast@59-north.com, and please do us a favor and review the show on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts. Until next time, hold fast.
I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you took up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any whores. But get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.